Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's another episode of Breaking the Silos. Another episode of Open Source Wednesday, where we talk about open source and how you can get started in open source. As a designer, as a programmer, or whatever thing you do in tech, how can you get started in open source? And today we have one big person in the industry. It's an open source maintainer. I know him through open source contribution. We've met in number of occasions. I met him at Open Source Africa in 2023. He was there giving a talk to us. And he has been a very good person to the community. So we'll be having Bidogi in our midst today, and he will be sharing the experience of open source maintainer, how they feel open source, and how they feel they can help you out. Join me and welcome Bidogi onto the stage. Bidogi, good evening.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. It's evening here from Nigeria. That's why I'm saying good evening. So I feel like, yeah, good day. How you doing? How's your side?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Pleasure to finally be on this and yeah, chat with you.
Yeah, cool, cool. Nice. Nice to see you actually. Yeah, okay. I feel you can get started because of our time. Our participants, we are very sorry for starting late. It's a lot of things behind the scene. But finally we are here and we believe you are going to learn a lot from B2G. So we'll be starting with an introduction. Many of the participants don't know you, including people that will be joining us live and people that will be watching this later. They don't know you before now. So we would like to know about you, your background, how you get into tech, how you start open source, and every other thing that you feel we should know about you. So you can go ahead
Yeah,
now.
yeah, excellent. Yeah, B Dougie is my name. Brian Douglas is my given name, and I have been in tech for about 10 years at this point. Got started my career doing sales, so I was doing IT sales for networking equipment. Decided to go back to school, really for business, but then I ended up finding my way in the open source because I wanted to build a project. So by Googling how to build a iOS app, found my way into eventually building a web app in Ruby on Rails. So the last 10 years, been working at startups. Some of them you've heard of, GitHub, Netlify, and got to see firsthand on how early stage startups work. But the entire time, I was also building open source like projects, but also contributing to open source. And yeah, like that's my entry point in how I got involved. I'd say I probably have done way more contributing to open source than maintaining. But I do have a couple projects I've still maintained to this day, and I'm happy to go into more detail.
Yeah, I think that's a lot. It took a level of desperation, level of belief that, oh, if I learn how to do this thing will be very useful for me at the end of the day. I can say that's the reason why you choose to Google search how to build something and you started building it. And at the end of the day, you end up doing it as a career. You end up seeing yourself doing it for people and solving problem with it. And
Yeah, I,
imagine, yeah,
I was gonna say that
yeah,
you're hitting on a key point, which is I get a lot of folks like the nature of open source and what I'm building today. A lot of folks just come in and say, "Hey, I want to be an open source," and we don't get much context from that question or that thought. And what I wanted to like my difference on how I onboarded into open source is like I had something I needed to solve. I had a problem or a pain point. I needed to build something. And I think when you have that pain point and you have something you want to solve, you end up moving a lot faster in the learning experience than if you're like, oh yeah, I want to be an open source, or I want to learn how to code, or I want to get into tech. But like if you just want to get into the thing, like that, there's like I basically what I'm just calling out, and I mentioned this in OS in Oscar when I was there speaking. Like you gotta kind of have to have the will to do something or have the interest to do something, and it can't just be I want to be a part of it because like I can go watch football or watch soccer, but it doesn't mean I'm gonna be on the field. Like you can watch this video here today or watch the stream, but if you want to be a part of it, you got to go do something to get on the field. And my entire career has been, oh, turns out the gate to get into this, like to get on open source or to maintain a project, is actually the door is really low. The bar is really low, and the doors are usually pretty open. But I think a lot of folks, even with the open door, everyone kind of just waits for someone to say, "Oh yeah, this is the door to walk through." When like I could say the same stuff that everyone else has said before me, and people will still not get it. And the difference is like people will take the chance to like do the thing that everyone's been talking about for the longest time.
Yeah, definitely. I feel with that, we can see that you have a lot of experience on, okay, you get a clear picture of what you want to do in the first place before even starting to do it. Because if you know what you want to do, you have relevant questions to ask rather than asking a fake question that cannot solve your problem at the end of the day. But having a clear vision and the thing that you want to, the problem you want to solve, will definitely guide you to leverage on that and how you can use it to solve problem and what you should learn, people you should talk to, and every other thing that comes to it. So that leads me to the next question that, okay, now in the community that you've been maintaining open source projects, you've been part of open source community. So in your experience, how do you feel this thing works together for people that want to get into open source? I want to get to open source. How can I leverage on this open source community that exists? How can I be part of open source as a whole? In your experience, what do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I'm gonna have lunch later today, so like I'm in San Francisco, so like quite a few hours away from a lot of your audience and yourself. But if I want to eat food later today, I don't. It just like it's not a question. Like I open the refrigerator or I go to the restaurant and I order food. And if I don't have money, then I start a step before, which is okay. How can I get food without money? Okay, maybe I can get some flour and water and make bread. So like if you want to get like you don't need to be a developer, you don't have to do open source. Like it's not a requirement. You do not have to have a GitHub profile. Like you could write code without any of that stuff. But the trend is if you have a GitHub profile, if you are involved in open source, you have a better opportunity because you're either you're known or at least you know something. So like there's a lot of ways to get started, but I go back to build something. If you have a project that you're proud of or that you're interested in building, whether it's a to-do app or it's like a scheduler or it just tells you when the next episode of your show or movie is coming out, whatever it is, like build something. And I think what we always get lost in the sauce on is like, oh, I'm going to build something that's going to make me money and be like a full-on startup. The very first project I built as an engineer was called Choich, Chuych. It was Yelp for churches. So I can find churches and locations to attend, and you have like reviews. 0 churches joined that site. Like I had 0 signups to that site, but I had all the pieces for people to sign up and build it. And what happened was I built the thing fully and it worked, and I add a bunch of dummy data on there. But what really happened is I learned how to code in the process. So every time I had I needed to add the map on there. So like what is out there that I can add maps and add locations and pins, and how can I take reviews? How do I do signups? All those things I built because I had a problem and a pain point to solve. And then I had a full-on product. And then I walked away and I was like, you know what? What's better is if I just get a job doing code. So I switched careers to write code full time so I can learn faster and better and like get the experience. And I'll answer your question in like another analogy, but I love basketball, like national basketball, NBA. And if I want to, and I at the time, like when I was growing up, like I didn't want to be in the NBA, but like if I wanted to be in the NBA, the thing to do is go play basketball. It's almost as simple as that. Like play basketball, do drills, play for a team, have real life work experiences doing basketball. So whether it's your local YMCA or the local court, you got to get on the field, you got to get in the court and do it. So when it comes to like open source, if you want to break into tech or this is your way, you've got to get on the court. So if you're like, oh, I started a bunch of repos or I commented on a bunch of issues or I was on Reddit or I went to Twitter Space or I went to YouTube, tell me at what point did you start writing code? And that's that whole like checkbox. Or like you got a camera, you got a laptop, you got a keyboard, you take pictures on Instagram. At what point did you start writing code? Because at the end of the day, if you want to get involved, you've got to start writing code and you got to tell people about it. So like if you do all the other stuff that like have a blog post or like get on Dev2 or Hashnode, you got to do the right code. Like there's no excuse or no shortcut to writing code. So what open source gives you is a playing field. It gives you a court. It gives you a place that you can go showcase your skills. So then the other thing is like, okay, well, I can't walk in and be the star of the team like with no experience. So like you can't expect that to happen. But you know what's real easy to do is like clean the floor or sweep the court after and before the game. So like when it comes to like open source, if you are helpful in commenting on issues and you go in the PRs and you click the link and you review the PR, like that's the best way to level up. Because what happens is, like, if you want to get on the field, you go stand next to the coach, you stand next to the captain of the team, and you do basically it's like chop wood, carry water is what they say in DevOps. Like, no one wants to carry water, no one wants to chop wood. But the folks that do chop wood and carry water, with the analogy, again, it's all over the place with analogies. If you do that part, you're easier to be noticed, because if you show your consistency and your willingness to, yes, I'll do the hard things that no one else will do. I'll label issues, I'll review code, I'll promote the project on social media and stuff like that. Then someone's like, oh, wow, I've noticed you've been around for a while. Like, did you want to pair with me and build something? And I think a lot of times we try to fix stuff in silence, in secret, before anybody knows we exist. And then we like show up with the code ready to go. And it turns out it was the wrong thing the whole time. And the hardest thing, that everyone wants to get a remote job, but no one wants to communicate. And you cannot work remotely for a company if you have no communication skills. So like there's a lot of steps that you can get in, like a lot of like intros and courses and blog posts that you can read. But it really comes down to first principles. Can you do the job? If you can't do the job, then figure out how to do that first.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. 100%. You cannot be a player without playing. You have to play before you can be a player. So you have to do the job before you can say, oh, this is the part you want to focus on. This is whether this thing is for you or not. Definitely, you have to do the work. That's the key points that we need to think around that, as a beginner or wherever level you find yourself. If you have been doing it, you have to do more. That's when you will know that, oh, you are increasing your experience, you are getting more experience, and you are knowing more things in wherever thing you are contributing and in the community as a whole. Okay, so that leads us to, because we want to talk about issues maintain face, reviewing PR, because you talk about, okay, if I'm contributing to an open source now, it will be good for me to review other people's PR. But before we talk about, I would like you to talk more about some of the projects you've created in the past, including open source and any other project that you feel, okay, it's open source there, people can contribute to. And that will lead us to talking about, okay, the challenges you face by accepting new PR, getting new people onboarded. So let's start from the project itself.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done a bunch of projects before open source, like small libraries to solve problems like cookies and React, or Angular cookies as well. Stuff that solved pain points that I was trying to solve. Being early, I've been doing React since 2015. So there was a lot of stuff that exists today doesn't exist, like what wasn't existing 10 years ago. So what I'm getting at is, like, it was always a small problem that I want to solve that I shared with the community. None of it was like big and popular, but that was never the goal. The goal was like, can I solve a problem and then have a solution off the shelf I can use in the future? And that's how most successful open source becomes that. There's a lot of companies that do open source, same deal. Like, they solved a problem. Like, we just got Mistral models up on Kubernetes. The engineer that works at open source, this open source stat stuff. Who cares if no one sees it? But we have a solution for ourselves. If someone else wants to ask us how we did that, we can point to it. And it's like not our main business. It's just on the side over here. So a lot of what I've done, like GitHub Actions, build a bunch of GitHub Actions that are open source. They're like feature complete. They're solved. I use them every day. And every now and then we'll get a contribution around it. But all that open source, it got to the point where I was making a lot of contributions. I needed a place to manage my open source. And it's not a great place to manage across organizations or across different projects. So I built a product called Open Sauce back in 2017, which is like a CRM for my open source. All my PRs in one place. I could see what status is. And that was the goal, is I just wanted to see all my contributions in one place. And that eventually moved into me getting a job at GitHub. So that project actually got me my job at GitHub, because I built it on GraphQL, and GitHub was the first public GraphQL API. And I went to their conference, spoke about it, and I was reached out to by the now COO of GitHub, before he was just a manager, and said, hey, you should work here. So I worked at GitHub for 5 years and saw another need, which is like, okay, cool, you can see PRs, but what if you could see like projects that need help? What if you can like highlight different contributions in the open? What if we can like have a list of projects that are trending? So that's what open source is today. And what we've done is we've taken a bunch of GitHub data and we've aggregated it into one place where anybody can like see what's happening. So Today, it's a next app. It's very approachable to make a contribution to. We have an API, which is actually not approachable to make contribution. Like you need to kind of know a little bit more about like how our infrastructure is made. And folks who have been around our Discord for a while, like they can make contributions to everything because they've been here since the beginning. And I think it's a lot of what open source is. A lot of folks are like, oh, I'm gonna make a contribution to React. But if you haven't seen how React's been built for the last 9 years, then you're probably not gonna be able to like make a contribution without a lot of like either mentorship or a lot of research. And no one wants to put the time in the research. So then we always look for like the easiest things to do.
Exactly.
And so what we're trying to do is like have a showcase of your skill set and your talent as a participant in open source, which we have with the open source profiles. So that's a high level. Like we have a bunch of projects within open source, the organization, things like the API, the front end. We have a bunch of other smaller projects like a CLI. We have some other stuff that's in the AI ML space, like our the things that sort of generate like the models and stuff like that. But for the most part, the dashboard is what most people interact with first.
Yeah, I think that's cool and that's amazing. One part that's very fascinating to me is the part you mentioned that it is through this open source contribution and creating open source project that got you job at GitHub. Okay, that's to tell our participants that if you are contributing to open source in one way or the other, definitely you can find yourself a job, a great job out there if you are looking for a job. And there are some arguments recently around okay, if you are looking for experience, you are looking for a way to get experience out there, start contributing to open source. Brian mentioned in the beginning of the talk that contributing to open source is not compulsory, that everybody must go to contribute to open source, but then it's a very good way for you to get those experience and being able to build with people and the community as a whole. So that leads me to the next question for Brian that I would like him to answer. Now you've been to open source community for long and you've seen new contributors joining your project and checking their PR, reviewing their code. So, what mistake can you point out from the this new beginner or even people that are experienced contributing to open source? What are those mistakes you can fix out from their PR that you feel anybody that is going into it again should avoid so that they can grow faster and can make a very good contribution in the project as a whole?
Yeah, mistakes really is communication. Like everyone thinks that you could open a PR or get merged, and then you have a check on your resume. But I think that what you miss out on a lot is the communication part. So like you open the like I'm a big fan of opening up a PR early. So like nothing's complete. Like you just spend one day on this or one weekend, open PR and make it a draft PR, and then ask the question of like, hey, I've got this far. This is what I've done so far. Like if anybody has any feedback, I'm just going to open up this early because, hey, I'm just here. I just want to let you know I'm working on this. And what happens is like maybe after a couple of days, someone's like, oh, you know what? I actually looked through your code. I have some recommendations on like how to like not code yourself into a place that you can't fix this. Because that's what happens. Like people drop massive PRs out of nowhere. And then it's like, oh, well, this is not the right way. But there's no communication. And I think it's like everyone thinks about like the destination. Like I get a job, I tech, I make $100,000, I'm good. But no one thinks about the journey. And the journey is like really what makes you get the $100,000 a year remote, no matter where in the world. And but no one considers that. So like if the journey was, oh, I put up a PR, the maintainer sat with me, and we jumped on a Zoom call, and they had a conversation with me about like, oh yeah, this is success, or this is how we like unblock you on this, or here's like whatever it is. Like here is the story that we can tell together. Now you have a story that no one else has. Like maintainer of this project now vouches for my skill set. So if you're like trying to get to the next level, you now have on your cover letter or recommendations or referrals. Oh, so and so worked with me. They can vouch for me. And the thing like my role in this entire ecosystem, like you, like I call it like B-Dougie is my name, but folks know who I am. So like if you're like, oh yeah, I worked on B-Dougie's project. Oh, I know B-Dougie. Like I'd love to learn more about like what you did and what you unblocked. But like we're thinking about the destination, never the journey. And the journey is like what builds the whole next step. It was there was a movie, Slumdog Millionaire. I don't know if everyone's seen that. It's quite a few years old, but the guy was on a TV show the movie, he's on a TV show asking game show questions, and every question asked, he knows the answer because he has a lived experience around it. So when it's like, how many pennies in this jar, like he knows what that is because he lived through an experience where he remembers it. And I think that's the same thing as an engineer. Like I remember sitting in San Francisco as my first job. My CTO asked, "Hey, we got to solve this problem of payments. No one's been able to solve it. It's a hard problem. Who do we know in the industry that has solved this problem before? Like, who do we know at other companies that could come in and just like give us like an hour? Like, we'll do lunch with them and we'll talk through it." And everyone thinks there's like a weird competition in San Francisco of like, well, we're all competing against each other. But the reality is, like, all these AI companies, they all talk to each other. Like, they're all comparing notes, and especially the open source ones, they all compare notes. So like when you think reactive Vue, like reactive Vue teams and Svelte, they all know each other. They all hang out in the same conferences. They all go to the same lunches, and it's not a competition that you think it is. But when it comes to open source, like everyone thinks I can't even Google the answer, and that's not true. You can Google whatever you want. You can ask whatever questions you want. So like again, going back to the original question, the thing that's like that I see all the time is that you really need to communicate, like upfront. Communication is like really key, because I already know you can write code because you have a GitHub account. So can you write good code, bad code? That's up for debate. But like what I'm getting at is like I need to find out the other stuff.
That's cool. Communication. I think it's every industry, whether you're doing code or if you are working in a company, definitely you need communication skill. And one of the things you get out of contributing to open source is how to communicate. If you open a PR, imagine you're opening a PR with changes of over 40,000. Who will check the PR for you? So if you start early, as Brian mentioned, you start early, make a PR draft, and everybody will start following up with it. Then you keep pushing more changes and all of that to get more contribution and more feedback from the community, and you improve your code along the line. Because of our time, I would like to ask, you mentioned that at some point you worked, and currently I don't know whether you're working for a particular company or some or organization, but then when you are working, how are you able to manage contributing to open source, maintaining projects, and as well being able to work in your day, probably your day-to-day job, the thing you have to do in the office? How are you able to match the three? Your life, work balance, contributing to open source, and the work that you sign up for. How are you able to manage that?
Yeah, I heard this thing from someone with way more experience than I did. I have about work-life balance, and it's a myth. So if you work more, you don't get more life, and if you live more, you don't get more work.
You have to
So
choose
like,
one.
yeah, and it's so the way I do it is like I know I have to eat every day, and I know there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So like that concept is the same thing as like, oh, I know I need to like advance my skill set, so I just schedule it. Like all my open source work has always been scheduled like on Fridays, really, because that was the easiest way to remember. So on Friday during the workday, I'm learning open source. I'm writing open source. I'm writing blog posts about the open source I'm doing. And my entire career has always been Friday's a pretty slow day historically. Like I'm doing that. And like it goes back to my analogy of like if you want to be a star, an athlete, if you want to play at the professional level, you're going to put in work and train. Like if you want a six pack abs, like you're going to put in the work and you're going to take out stuff out of your diet and you're going to really focus on that. And like not everybody needs a six pack. Like I don't have a six pack today, but there's certain times in your life where it makes way more sense to have a six pack. Or if you want to be at that level of professionalism, there you go. So what it comes down to, like in my 20s, I spent way more time, like I'm 37 today. I spent way more time working on my craft and working my skill than I do today. I don't spend as much time writing code and maintaining software, but when I needed to, I scheduled it. I made sure it was a thing, and I made sure it was an unmovable thing on my calendar. So like that's how you do it. So like if you're later in your life and you're later in your 30s, obviously there's going to be way more sacrifices if you have family and you got other commitments. But the best time to do this is in your earlier years when you do have the time to say, you know what, I don't make any money. I want to make more money. I'm going to put in the skill to put in the time to do it this way. And and I would also say, like, I mentioned $100,000. So like, that's just a random number. Like if you make less, you make more than that. Like that's up to you and where you live and what you need to survive. Um, but what I'm getting at is like this. I just saw a job posting on Netflix for anywhere from 400,000 to 1.7 million, and I actually have friends at Netflix, so like that's a very realistic range. So if you're in the top of the range, you better expect you're the top of the output and the team. If you're in the bottom of the range, you should probably be looking for your next job. And that's literally how it works when it comes to those ranges. So like if you're like, oh, I would love that job and take the minimum, like you're not going to get offered the job the minimum salary. That's not the case. What they want is somebody in the middle that can achieve the next level. Because if you think about like any sports, like NBA, and this was there's a whole articles about Netflix and managing teams at Netflix. If you're a low performer, Netflix asks you to leave. Like hey, it's time for you to start looking for other roles elsewhere. Because if like you're not the best performer on the team, like you're gonna get cut. And like maybe that looks like a layoff, but let's be realistic. Like you get fired. Like everyone calls it a layoff, but it's not always layoffs. If you're not performing,
Promotion.
you will be fired. So then if your role is to like stay on top of your craft and train, you're gonna put in some time and you're gonna train because like I can't hand you a 200K salary and not expect you to reach 200K level of work. Because at the end of the day, like a dollar is a dollar, and if I give you 200,000 of them, I would expect you to produce 10x of that revenue from your role alone. So basically, that's how do I do work-life balance? Is I spent way more time being good at my craft earlier in my life to now when I can coast and like know exactly what to do when I see a problem.
Sure, sure. That's very cool. That's an advice to everybody that at early stage of their career, definitely focus more on getting the skills. And while you are growing and when you are feeling you will not have much time to contribute or to be impactful, definitely those skills that you've learned will help you out along the line. Yeah, I was giving a talk today. I mentioned the fact that if you're working in a company that they are paying you, let's say 200K, definitely, as you said, you have to do the work of 200K. And if you feel like, oh, I want to upgrade, I want to be getting 300K, definitely you should know that your work will be improved, or the work that you are going to be doing will either increase, or your level of productivity needs to be increased. So definitely, that's a very good one from Brian. We
Yeah,
appreciate that from you.
and
Thank you so
I'll,
much.
I'll add to that, which is like if you're the one with the less skills, you've got to sacrifice more. So like this recording right now is 9 a.m. my time. So like I don't know your background or whatnot, but like I get a lot of folks reaching out to me to be on a podcast at 5 a.m. And which I get is like a better time for them. But if you want me to be on the podcast, if you want me to show up, I'm now at a stage in my career where I need you to meet at my time. And so like if I was a manager at GitHub and I had people on my team across the entire globe. But I'm the manager, I'm the director. Like I need you to meet me in the middle. And it's the same thing when it comes to like, hey, I would love to work on your open source project, but I've got other engagements, blah, blah, blah. Like if you really want it that bad, you can get it. And you've got to actually sacrifice a bit more if you want whatever that end goal is or whatever that destination that you're striving towards. Like part of that journey is like a little bit of sacrifice. So again, with the open source thing, like if you put in some time to like go and be helpful in a project and like debug and open issues and label stuff, like show that you can chop wood and carry water, like you have further advanced. Like basically the bar is really low. Like everyone thinks that you got to do such this, like get a cool camera, have a keyboard, and have an Instagram following. But if you just showed up and wrote code, or showed up and showed that you could write code, you're further ahead of almost everyone else who's also trying to do the same thing. Because again, like if the job was paying $500 a month and that was it, and I think that we'd have a lot more people getting into tech a lot easier. But because the distance between actually the salary and like the opportunity is, you've got to show that you can get that six pack, you can do the skills, like you can set yourself up for success. And going back to like this conversation about being maintainer, like I've brought people up with me who don't live in San Francisco, who don't live in the US, and the difference is like you stand out, like you showed up, you asked me the right questions, like you showed that you weren't going to take a bunch of my time, but you showed that you were listening and paying attention and like brought something to the table.
Yeah, that's cool. You need to show off. I think the title of this session should be play to be a player, because you have been talking about you have to do the work before you get an output, put in something before you get something out of it. So you have to do the work before you can expect something out of the whole process. And don't forget, he mentioned the fact that you have to trust the process. Most of us are looking into the destination, we're not looking into the process. We cannot cheat the process along the line. Okay, our time is fast spent. We only have like 5 minutes for the participants. Thank you so much for joining us. In case you have any question, this is the time for you to ask your question. We'll be rounding up in a couple of minutes. But before you come up with your question, I would like Brian to talk about the future of open source. There are a lot of things coming out. We are talking about AI, and every other thing that comes into the community. So, how do you see the future of open source?
Yeah, I don't think any of it changes. Like I think AI is only so AI is really not AI. Like AI is automated ML. So nothing's sentient yet. Like AGI will be a thing. Like I think they're estimating in the next 10 years. But as of today, the folks who have the knowledge and the skill set, like if I go generate code in Copilot, I still have to know if that works. So like how do I run that code? Then you ask more questions. But then what if it's pulling in the wrong code? Like senior engineers will still be able to distinguish, okay, this is not the right way to write this code. And you still got to go read a book and you still got to go write code to understand that like this is a better way, a more performant way. I spent some time building adding a feature to a project I didn't touch in 2 years. So I used ChatGPT Copilot chat to basically ask questions of the file I was looking at and be like, okay, cool. I'm adding this feature. I wrote all the code that I need, but I just need to know like next steps and how to like figure out how to like migrate this thing to like 2024 standards. And that's what I use it for. Like I did the work, I chop wood, carry water, but now I'm not bringing this over the edge by asking AI to do the thing. The analogy I also use, like, I don't know if you have a microwave at home, but we have microwaves. I can have food in like 2 minutes. Easy. Does that mean that I never cook? Does that mean I never go to a restaurant? No, it's not the case. The quality of the food I get at restaurants is better than when I cook at home. And I can cook better food and like not go to restaurants, but the opportunity there is like I can either be a good at cooking and good at discerning quality food, or I could like take whatever the microwave spits out, and I can take like the lowest quality of whatever I got. So that's the difference when it comes to AI and code. Like we're all going to discern what the best quality is. Like we can decide if we want to be chefs or not, or we can just like be the server and we just serve up steaming hot dishes. But like where you fit within that position, I think we'll need less developers in the future. But today, like we still need more because the same people building AI are developers. So I think the shift is like, do you want to build AI? Do you want to build the next stage? Figma is having a conference in June about how you can now bridge the gap between design and coding with their dev mode and all these other tools. Does that mean you don't need developers? No. Like the developer still needs to basically make sure this thing's up and running in live, running on a server. But like we're removing one less body that needs to be in there. So that's the opportunity. That's the future. Like you still got to learn how to code. You still got to read a book. You still got to like go put some code on the internet. And none of what's happening right now today should stop you from doing that.
Sure. Thank you so much for that advice. I think every participant out there will be seeing it. Will see that opportunity that, oh, if somebody is telling you that AGI is coming, machine is going to replace human being, developer are not going to have job at the end of the day. You can now see from what Brian just said now that, oh, definitely, you have opportunity out there. So I'll be sharing Brian's portfolio with us. If you want to check more about him, if you want to read more about him, if you want to reach out to him to ask questions and you want to get started in open source, definitely would love you to do that. So while we are expecting some of the question, and I cannot see anyone in the comment section. So with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. And I'll say I have to drop off in a minute because I've got to go to another meeting.
sure.
I've done a lot of these conversations, and my request to everyone else is like reach out to me, like mention me, show up at our Discord, discord.gg/open sauce. Like we like if you're looking to get an open source, if you want to find maintainers to collaborate and get mentorship, we have a oss.fy/bdougie will show up my profile. But here is an opportunity for you to get recommended projects based on your interest. Like there's opportunity out there, and like everyone's doing this. Everyone has a platform to showcase like what you can do and how you can contribute. The difference is like, will you do it? So like, if you have questions, we have a Discord. Very few people will cross the chasm and ask a question. Very few people will go contribute to do open source, and very few people will get a job doing it. So that there's like a number of all these stars going to the NBA and like the drop off of like the skill level. Like usually people give up eventually. Like if you want it that bad, there's an opportunity there, and I do encourage anybody to like just go for the opportunity and ask questions and show up. Rashid,
Yeah.
and yeah, best of luck with everyone listening to this.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your time. So definitely, we'll definitely reach out for any help that we need out there. So we really, really appreciate your time. So until next time that we'll be meeting, definitely we would love to have you again on the show. But then we'll reach out to you on what's next the next time, and we believe you will come and join us. So thank you so much for doing what you are doing for the community. Um, with this, our participants, thanks so much for joining. We'll be having another session definitely. If you are into open source, we do have open source. We do have breaking the silo where we talk about how you can get into DevOps, how you can leverage on DevOps for your community and your project and your organization as a whole. So to not waste our time to free everybody, thanks so much for joining. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get a notification whenever we'll be having our next show. So until the next time, see you then. Thank you so much for joining. Bye bye, everybody.